Hello, everyone. Welcome to Catalog and Cocktails, coming to you live from DGIQ Conference over in Washington, D.C., the wonderful Omni Hotel here on Shoreham. And we're here with Juan Sequeda, your host, Tim Gasper, your other host, also Scott Taylor, keynoted today at the DGIQ Conference. Thanks for hanging out with us and joining us. How you doing?
Hi, guys. Happy to do that. I saw a show going on in the lobby. I thought I should be part of it.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
All right. So we're live. I like the whole. Maybe if you hear the background noise, it's because we are truly live right now in the hotel, and we're waiting for our cocktails, which hopefully they'll show up anytime soon.
It's the cocktail part.
I know.
I forgot what it was.
An order in.
It's on its
Well,
way.
when they're coming in, you can pull the
Yeah,
put
you
the
should
order.
stick an order
Okay.
on.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. Just give me the details. Ironed out here.
All right. Well, okay. So this is going to be a special episode because there's no particular guest, the topic is going to be really the takeaways from today from the conference, the DGIQ. So I don't know, Scott, you're our guest. You're our guest here. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I
You
know.
decided-
All right.
Kick us
You've been
off.
around here all day today and yesterday. You were here yesterday too, right?
No,
you
got here
okay.
last night.
Okay, you gave a keynote today, which is you've already been you're a special guest. You've already been a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, I like.
You gave a talk. Give us a little bit about what you spoke about and what did people say? What did people come up to you?
I had a fabulous time. I was on today for sure. The audience was tremendous. In terms of this group, data management folks are our people. And I seem to be able to tap into their angst and pain. And I've been told that my sessions sometimes are therapeutic for folks. But I got to do something, one of the favorite things I like to do in all of my existence, which is hold for laughs. There's nothing like it, right? When you're on there and you just know you got something and you're on and everybody's wrong with it.
Everyone's excited. They're along for the ride.
Yeah, and you kind of test it early. All right, are they responding or not? But this was
Yeah.
a very active crowd, which was a blast. And that's always a thrill when you're on stage doing that sort of thing. But the essence of my session was around being able to tell a better data story or to get support for data management, which all these folks are trying to do, and focus on the why, not the how. They didn't improve this title, but usually that session goes as "Data's the New Bullshit" as the title. So that's a little edgy there. If you want to bleep that out, that's fine. But
It's all right. Honest, no BS.
Yeah, honest, no BS. You guys, right? Exactly. Data's the new BS. But it was, and the response afterwards is really wonderful. Like, you really helped me figure this out. Like, I'm trying to break through to my stakeholders. You gave me a different way to look at it. And I think I say way up top, my objective of the session is to give people a new way to talk about what they already know.
Yeah.
And we all know how to do data, but can we explain it to the business in a way to get stakeholder engagement, executive support, funding, money? We all need money for the kind of data work we want to do. And that's just my little niche there.
I like that the you have the 3 V's of data storytelling, right? The vocabulary, the voice, and the vision. So I think for me, you keep it. You say kind of what I see this a lot. We have to repeat the obvious, and when you hear this stuff, it kind of seems obvious, but sometimes the obvious it doesn't kind of register a lot with folks. And I think that that's a simple one. Just use the vocabulary of the business and stop saying the whole data mesh,
whatever,
all that.
I know. I make that sense, right? The words you use are important. And when isn't that the case? P.S. Right? That's what everybody's. But in a business context, somehow you lose sight of that, and just keeping people grounded on. You're talking to folks who don't understand what you're talking about. And maybe it's not because they need to understand it. Maybe you need to understand a better way to explain it to them so they just really get the essence of what you're trying to do.
Make it simple and practical, and let's cut straight to the value instead of getting too wrapped up in the complexity.
And then to connect with your talk with Malcolm Hawker gave
great.
a keynote
for me today. Malcolm was tremendous.
And so one of the things that I liked about Malcolm connecting with you is I'm just looking at, I got your slides here. You have all these relationships, right? So you're talking about, they're not just Malcolm said, they're not just the business users, right? They're your customers, right? And we want to go talk about, is it customer, your vendor, your partner, prospect? These are the words that we should be thinking about. And then when we're doing data, we're like, wait, who is actually the consumer and the customer of this data? And let's actually go speak to those people because we don't really understand who they are. So I think for me, one of the big, as always, this is always a theme in every single data conference, is people around this stuff. And honest, no BS, it's still kind of annoying sometimes that it's like we still are saying all this, and are people getting it or not? I don't know. What you keep
one by one. You know, I don't think we're going to solve the whole problem, but if you could just somehow evangelize enough or change a couple people's minds or have people realize, okay, maybe we should do it this way. I mean, one of Malcolm's points, I guess it's not going to be here, so I'll steal his big point there, but it was when people talk about it's the people. I love when he just turned out to the audience and said, the people are us. We're the people. This is it. It's not like there's another group. And whether it's internal stakeholders, as he was referring to in terms of customers of data, or external customers of a company, that understanding the nature of the relationship, being able to codify it in some way, tracking the data, that's all core to what people have to focus on.
And then, so following up on Malcolm, right? I love his whole story is like, we want to be the data heroes, which is like, you have a positive mindset and this negative mindset. And I think he's said the whole thing is like, why do we use the term data literacy, implying that people are illiterate, and that's a negative mindset in a way, right? And I remember when he was saying that, like, I was looking around and people were like, we were like, wait, I use that term all the time. Like they're catching themselves saying like, "Whoa,
he goes rabid on data literacy." So that's his thing. He goes right after it.
But so what I like is he has his axe. He's saying like, we want to need to be more customer centric around this. We need to rethink data governance, and make it about enablement. Rethink data quality. And this is another thing, is like, we all like to complain a bit about like, oh, my data quality is bad. It's like, what? But these businesses are still working together, right? There's something that we need to revisit how we're doing data quality.
Let's do something about it, right?
So that is that main shift. I think that it's really just about having a positive mindset. I think sometimes we're in the trenches, which is true. Like, I think people are stuck doing all this stuff, and they kind of end up being somewhat in a negative mindset. And look, it's up to us to like switch that, and I think treat the consumers of it, realize that there are customers and we're in service of them. That's like, it's a great reminder for me. So
he did great.
So that's kind of the people thing. What else, Tim? What did you take away on this topic of people and kind of the human side?
Well, I think that one of the things that, this ties into a little bit of a bigger theme, I think, of the entire conference, is that there were some new topics that, we were diving into, especially around things like AI governance and how do we address that? How do we use AI to help with governance and things like that? And like, one thing that I think was consistent across all of this is that there wasn't a ton new that we're really talking about here. Like, we're still talking about data quality. We're still talking about people being at the center to really help to fix all of these problems and drive change in the organization. So I think that was one key thing around people as well, is that even when we're talking about some of these new topics, always it came back to how people are going to be involved in really helping, right? There's no special technology unlock that's the magic pill. It comes back to people making smart decisions and pushing the ball forward with change.
And one of the things we were talking about yesterday was, when I look at all the topics here, a lot of them are not about like the groundbreaking next thing. And it's like, what was happening is that we have to continue to say these basics over and over again. But also what happened is, like, I talked to a lot of people, this is their first time. So it's also, we come here and we're like, well, we've been doing this stuff for a long time, but then I have to empathize and realize that there's the people who are coming to this conference and the people coming to the space, they're just learning, and this is the place where they're coming to do, like, quote unquote, those basics. But it's like, it's really important that we need to just get those foundations well in place. So and then we got our next guest coming in live. But you know what? Here's we got a little. So Malcolm is here, but you guys need drinks.
I said you were going to.
But when she came in,
complain on the air here.
Go to the bar.
Go to the bar. You're on next. Live here.
Live, right?
What do you want to drink?
I'll have a fat tire.
A fat tire.
All right.
Yeah. All right, good.
All right.
You see, this is all live.
We're talking about you,
Malcolm will be back with a couple of beverages for us.
That's it.
Right. So we see a lot of the kind of the traditional data governance type of talks, and you'd go to, like, I'm just nodding my hands, like, I'm not learning anything. But then again, empathizing that there's so much stuff people come here, they need to learn the basics, which is a call out for the entire Dataversity folks and the DGIQ. Like, this is truly the place to come to go learn. So they're not sponsoring. This is not. We're non-salesy, but I love to sell anything that's about education people to go learn. So
they have the training, they have the CDMP certification, they've got a whole days. It's a 5-day event all across, and I think Tony and the team do a tremendous job. I've been working with them for about 5 years on a bunch of events, and coming to peer on it. But I think they do a great job. They're really solid for the data management side of the community. Really focused on that in a way that other events kind of bridge out on the theme du jour.
So AI governance is obviously one of the big new themes, the topics today. This conference compared to like the past. Kick us off. What are the things that you've been you kept right with?
Well, yeah,
we got a bunch of notes here.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it a little bit.
I have no notes
in the context of people. That's all right. It's all up here, right?
Yeah, no, it's just there you go.
I mentioned about AI governance and how people ends up being a key theme around that as well. I think what's been interesting is, there's been a lot of topics on AI governance, and I think a lot of it was trying to define AI governance and really compare, like, what's the difference between AI governance and using AI to help you with governance, right? And so a lot of talks that were kind of differentiating, trying to tease apart kind of the differences of those two. And I came away feeling like there were a lot of overlaps. Like, everyone agrees that data quality is overlap between the two. Understanding the data you have is shared across the two, right? But there are some differences too, right? Like bias, like versioning, like protected attributes. There's some differences as well. So I think there was a lot of good teasing out some of the differences of these two things, but ultimately it all came back. Like, there were probably 7 or 8 talks on AI governance over the last 2 days, right? All of them kind of came back to, like, you have to have the right foundations in place. You have to have the right people in place. You have to push forward on what matters to your business. And so in that sense, it didn't feel like there was a ton new. I definitely talked to a couple of folks. For example, I was hanging out with Shrevin, who's head of governance and data over at Infostructs. And he was saying, hey, I was coming here, kind of curious to see if people were going to talk about AI governance, and it was going to be radically different. Like, it was going to go in a very different direction, like cutting edge, more technology forward. And he's like, no, this feels like it's still about foundations. It's still about people and good practice.
So can I ask
All
you a
right,
question?
Malcolm, come on in.
Malcolm, welcome, man.
All right.
Hello, Internet.
Malcolm.
So in those conversations with AI governance, was anybody able to actually put the meat on the bone? Could anybody actually say, these are the policies that we are using to enforce ethics or bias? Anybody talk about like actual implementation and enforcement of any data governance policies, like data quality rule, a profiling methodology, anything that was specific and unique to AI?
So my honest no BS answer is no.
I feel like the customer examtions got the closest. Like, Amex got pretty close, and like we got into some details there, but the consultant talks were a little bit
so I think
light on details.
Come on over here as we get everybody in here. So okay, so
come in tighter.
So I think from my perspective, what I saw was, first of all, there is financial services presentations around this, and they were talking about AI governance. Still, kind of at a high level, it was like, oh, these are all the things that can happen and could happen, and we need to have the frameworks and extend this and deal with bias mitigation and all those types of things. And then you'd also have are some of the consultancies and some of, let's call it, I'm not naming names, legacy vendors talking about, well, we got this framework and we have these tools that have expanded to go do all these things, right? And you know what? For the financial services, I can imagine that they are going to have to go do all these things, which are much more complicated, but because that's a regulatory world that they live in. But did they go into very concrete examples of what they did? Like, here's a specific policy? No, right? Now, Tim and I, we gave a talk, and it was the honest no BS about AI governance, which is like, keep it simple. Like, you got to start with the super basic stuff, which is, you know what? How about you take the current policy that you already have and you associate that to the new AI things that you guys are cataloging? I mean, and because honestly, we were talking to our customers, like, shout out to, we work a lot with Prologis, and they you know what they started to do? They're creating GPTs. They literally, they have an open AI enterprise account. People can go create all these bunch of GPTs, and guess what's happened? They've created so many of these things, and they're like, which one should I go use? So they're like, it's kind of similar to like I created a bunch of data and it's a swamp of stuff. So they're like, how about if I start cataloging and I'm like, this is an approved one. So they now can go into a catalog and go search later. That for us is AI governance. That's what we start off with. And we presented that. And I was like, Tim and I were like, this is probably too simple, but this is we believe this is the beginning. Hold on.
Yeah.
And we asked everybody at the end, what do you guys think? Is this simple or too simple? And the majority of people was like, this seems great. And not going to be that much complicated. So,
No.
Well, but what one can argue, right? If I assume they're using like OpenAI Studio or one of the many GPT makers, and if that's the case, then that's really not too much different than what we've been doing always around applying governance to software.
100%.
During the software development
100%.
process. It doesn't have anything to do with the underlying data. It doesn't have anything to do with the underlying data collection processes or data quality. It's just about it's a checkbox on an SDLC process. Is it not?
And I think that's how it should start.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. It may be leveraging some data potentially. It might be leveraging some documents that were fed into it or something like that. But it is a version of code running somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
So how much of it is AI and how much of it is really about governance? It feels like it's more around governance
It's really,
AI.
I'd agree. I mean, it's just another thing that you need to govern.
Right,
And by the
okay.
way, it's like, do I need to govern everything? It's like, I don't know. How about you start governing the things where you're feeling the pain about things? In this example that we have with Prologis, they're like, you know what we're governing? People are complaining about that. We have all these new chat GPTs and chat apps, and we don't even know which ones to go use. And they're building these things so people can be more productive. So I want you to use them to be productive. But now I'm making so many of these things that now you're not being productive. So I mean,
Similar conversation you would have about a bunch of data sources in the
Exactly.
catalog.
So
It's really about governance
Right.
and the spin. Maybe people are feeling like, is this a whole different kind of governance? No, it's just governance for some more stuff.
And I think this is how it should start, and the conversation will evolve, and we will find people who start doing the simple things, and they realize that was too simple. We have these perfect. We'll start finding out these things, and I hope next year something more come out.
So I saw a presentation that actually was for the first time was what I would call putting actual meat on the bone for governing data that would be used in a Gen AI process in a complex prompt where you could actually overlay a data quality policy in a prompt. Where it was a husband and wife duo. The husband worked for KPMG and the wife ran an AI institute. And forgive me, I forget their names.
I met them.
They are absolutely brilliant. And what they showed was some of the stuff that you've been talking about a long time, which is some sort of complex RAG pattern where in the RAG, she was applying what she called a rubric, which basically is a set of parameters that said the data must be between here, and it must have these values and these between these values and these values. And plus, here's a knowledge graph, plus a set of rules. Now tell me something about this data, which was like, aha. Like the first time at one of these conferences, somebody actually said, here's how you would operationalize a set of data quality rules against unstructured data, text, to produce a trustworthy, more accurate, more consistent response. The stuff you've been talking about for months.
Arvind Sathi and his wife Nina.
They're brilliant.
Got to give them a shout out.
Absolutely.
Right shout
Applied
out.
AI Institute
Applied AI Institute and KPMG.
and KPMG.
Yeah, it wasn't just knowledge graphs. She kept referring to it as a rubric. It was basically a set of parameters that was fed into the prompt.
I feel like we're in this phase now where, and I'm glad you brought this up, Malcolm. Like we need more details.
Yes.
Right. I feel like we've spent about 6 to 12 months kind of talking about like the contours. Like, let's look at an example. Like one area that I'd like to understand more that I didn't feel like I came away with an answer here. Maybe I shouldn't expect it from here at this conference. Is like bias. Like, what is the right way to approach measuring, detecting, preventing drift around bias? Right.
And
How do you quantify it?
Well, here's the thing. I think that's also some areas that are discussed and being done in other areas, and like the whole ML ops community and stuff, right? So here, as you mentioned, it's kind of like this is the data management community, but there's other machine learnings and AI
Parallel universe
right?
out there.
Yeah.
And like I was a month ago, whatever, I was at the ML ops world in Austin. And I'm like, I sat down and I'm like, I'm listening to all these talks and like, this all is very similar to what people are doing in the data world, but for them, their world starts once once the data is somewhere, they take it, right? And then they have their observabilities, right? They don't use the word governance, which is fascinating that I said, look, they don't.
Right.
I was wondering if they were going to go use the word AI governance, and the word governance did not show up at all.
What they say,
but they were
ops.
Yeah, it's part of the ops, and I heard some like firewalls and stuff like that. But when you talk to the people, they're like, no, we're all still talking about the same thing, right? Like, how do I detect? In this case, hallucinations would be one of these things, right? Or like, what's going in, what's going out? Am I keeping track of the outputs and see if there's any drift around this? So there's a parallel universe right there. Now, I do wonder if those are going to merge, or they're always going to be separate. Should they be separate? Are there parts that should be merged? I don't know. I think I also wonder if it's like you look at where the budget is being spent and people are like, wait, you're using like you have a tool to help you find data so you can create features, and you have a tool here that can help you find data so you can transform it into something. Like, you're both finding data and transforming data. Why are we doing? Maybe they're, I don't know. I
don't know whether those communities will overlap, but you hope that the people who work at the same company who are part of both of those communities
are talking
at least
and
connected to each other.
You know
right?
what? And this is something that's not happening, I think, because we would have those people here at this conference and having this conversation about bias, right? And vice versa would have that. And I think that's the opportunity.
Bias is going to be expressed in ways that I suspect that somebody in ML would not, it's the right way to say this, would not be overtly looking for. Right? Bias is going to be expressed in a narrative. Bias is going to be expressed in a story, right? It's going to be a string of words. Bias is not going to be expressed in a field missing, or a field being malformed, or you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think your opinion about bias.
Doom. There he goes.
He's here all week.
Try and bring something.
But if I decide to catalog something, if I decided to approve all these terms but not to approve these other fields or whatever, like, I am biased or that, and then somebody's like, well, I should not use that because it was not approved, but then my decisions based on that data are based on what somebody else decided that was approved. And you know what? They just probably had to do too much work to figure out if the other one should approve or not.
So we need to separate bias in the behavior of the model and bias inherent to the data. Right, and my statement was more the latter, not the former.
Right.
The former, the bias in the behavior of the model, I think that's a little easier to suss out because you just test it, right? You just run the test.
You can get quantitative about, like, okay, before it was, like, race is one that often people look at, right? It's like, it's targeting white people too much, it's targeting black people too much, right? But like, it's when you switch the framing that it becomes a little more complicated.
Well, right, but then you get into things like, okay, so is it going to be harder to suss out within a day? The only way you're going to be able to do it is to build the models and to run some tests, which is going to decrease your success rate, which is going to make data people say that, oh my gosh, only 15% of ML models are now making it to production. Sorry, another rant of mine. But yeah, putting more.
Is it a full 20% currently?
It depends on who's trying to generate the most clicks. It depends on who's trying to generate the most clicks.
Did you know that? Yes.
I mean, but to your point, quantifying that actually, what does that actually mean? Give me something that I can use to actually enforce a policy against data that will limit my exposure to bias. I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
I mean, I really don't. So, but I don't think most people do.
So. I think these are some of the things that we'll have to get more specific on. And there was an interesting comment that Junaid, he's over at First Citizen Bank. I was checking out his Distinguishing AI Governance versus Data Governance, the panel that he was on, and he said that like regulation is not going to dictate this for us. Like, we're going to have to figure this out ourselves in terms of, like, what's the right framework. Like, for example, should you check for bias anytime before something goes to production? Always? In certain cases? Right? And is it the governance team's job to dictate what the policy is going to be around that?
Right. I don't want that job. I do not want that job, right? Because I know that I would fail for sure because I'm biased.
Yeah.
Right? We're all biased.
Well, the easy thing is we'll say it's not governance. That's ML ops. Like, we don't have to worry about
so getting back to the overlapping universes, the ML ops
ML people, you take care of that.
Yeah, go.
So there's also an overlapping universe that you know well, is the world of knowledge management. There's a whole other world out there of librarians that are building and managing taxonomies that are essentially doing stewardship, but they don't call it stewardship. Right? There's a whole other world out there, like the world of search, right? And building search indexes and building these taxonomies of data. I've had conversations with those people. It's like, do you realize you're like on the cusp of being able to operationalize AI at scale within your organizations, and it's like, yeah, I mean, not having those conversations. So I see all these things kind of starting to like coalesce somehow. But that's the coalesce ball.
This is coalesce gesture.
Yes.
For those who are listening, it's like a ball, a rotating ball.
That's coming together.
It's coming together at the same time.
It's coming out of the orb of light that is my head.
Yes, you have this. You do have this.
Yeah.
This is why if you're listening to the podcast, you should watch. You should watch because it's more fun.
Well, okay, so
I want to see what notes you have on mine.
I'm not surprised that we had a lot of really complicated frameworks of discussions about AI governance, and I'm kind of sad that we didn't hear more about like how people are actually doing it and how they're starting. But at the same time, I'm like, people are just literally starting. They probably haven't even had the chance to go write anything up or share it. So I think our message here, and this is what I'm really curious to see what's going to happen in this new year is, in 1 year's time, are we going to still be talking about you should have a center of excellence that has your AI
focus on foundations,
right? Or focus on your foundations, like right? Or are we going to start seeing like, no, this is how our remit of governance now includes AI, and we're doing it this way and so forth. So I'm just curious on how people are going to start thinking about this for next year.
Progress is going to be slow. This is more terrifying. Go to these conferences. Sometimes I, talk with all kinds of people, and somebody will come up to me from a bank that everybody's heard of, and they say something like, we're just starting our data governance program. And it's like, oh my God, really? Aren't you a bank or a hospital,
right?
Or somewhere, where there's money or death involved, high stakes businesses. And there's, we're just beginning our journey. I'm like, look, I'm moving my funds right now.
You're like, what's the name
of
your organization?
So it's always
again?
going to be, the sort of moral of that story is it just seems that people are always starting.
So on the people
or starting over, right?
Yeah, or starting over.
And connecting it to Laura's keynote yesterday, Laura Matson, I like how she presented the three roles, right? The disruptor, the optimizer, and the keeper. So the disruptors are the ones who initiate change, right? Here to go make something different, right? The optimizers, that's kind of the majority of the people, right? They're the ones who are kind of building the bridges and making this stuff work and being efficient. And what I found really interesting about the whole keepers is like, they're the folks who are like, well, this is how it's always been done. But
you talked a lot about that kind of mindset
But what I find interesting about how she presented is that when you say it's what's always been done, it's because they actually have so many learnings about what's worked and what doesn't work. So there is a lot to unpack from those folks, because they're like, wait, we have learned what works and what doesn't work. So don't just say we're going to do it differently. It's like, because we've probably seen this before, right? So I think those keepers are the ones that you have a lot to learn from. And that was for me an aha moment. It was like, I kind of like dismiss a lot of those folks, and I should reconsider.
Who does a really brilliant job at that in her book? Sol Rashidi. So Sol actually, like, I read her book thinking, okay, this is going to help me.
Also, former guest, listen to her.
Yeah, Sol Rashidi, thumbs up to Sol. In her book, AI Survival Guide, I'm figuring this is all going to be about AI. And there was a lot of it in there about people and behaviors and how they act. She actually, I think she describes 10 archetypes, not just 3, but like 10 of them. And she's Sol. I mean, I'll give her credit. She's like, these people don't include in the meetings. Right? Like she actually says
we all know who they are.
If you're trying to move forward with AI, those people, nope, not them. These ones can go to this type of meeting and this type of meeting, but they can't go to this type of meeting. I was like, oh, all right, this is a little different, a little refreshing.
Honestly, that's
survival guide is aptly titled.
That's refreshing advice, because I think this actually came up in some dinner conversation yesterday when we were hanging out with some folks where we were talking about how we're a little bit in this mode of consensus culture right now.
Oh God, yeah.
And what really doesn't do well with consensus culture is change and disruption and progress, right? And so we sometimes you got to be bold and be willing to say like, hey, look, you're a negative Nancy. I'm not inviting you to the party, right? Yeah. You're gonna be a downstream recipient of the policy we decide on.
Yeah. So Sol basically kind of advocated the right people at the right time. Yeah. And she's basically saying there is a role for naysayers. There is a role for what may call a discernment type of personality,
a critic or whatever.
Yeah. There's a role for that. So it wasn't just like exclude everybody all the time. Because a part of her book was also, it's like, hey, if these people are continuing to do this, you need to find them other roles somewhere outside of the organization. So she's pretty blunt about it. But Yeah, I found that interesting. I found Laura's perspective on it interesting. Is don't just necessarily dismiss people who are kind of like negative all the time, but there is a role for disruption, and I would argue that disruption requires bold, brave steps that one could argue we're not taking enough of.
Yeah, and maybe more important than who's included or excluded from the meeting is somebody making a decision, making a call, and saying, going back to bias. Here's how we're going to treat bias, right? We're going to treat it like I was riffing, right? Every time something goes to production, there's a checklist, and part of that checklist is have we done some profiling around bias, right? And it needs to go in front of our AI committee to before it goes to production.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the wrong policy, but I'm making a decision, and we've discussed it. This is the decision, and if it's wrong, then we'll fix it.
Yeah. So to your point, though, to your question, Juan, in a year from now, where are we going to be? I think we're largely going to be in the exact same spot.
Yeah, I know.
We're going to be. Meanwhile,
I don't want that to be true.
Jenny and I
We're right in this couch. We're calling it today.
Yes,
Next
we're like the
year,
Muppets.
2025.
You and I are like the old guy in the Muppets. We're like, seen this before.
I don't think
Walking
so.
uphill,
That'll
both
never
ways.
work.
Exactly.
Are there any puppets behind this couch?
There are no puppets.
There
behind
can be.
this. I did not pack any. There could be. Oh, this is a great spot here.
Yeah,
I
that'd be
think
good, right? This would be good.
Who's got one of those swag socks? I can make it happen.
Got a data wool sock that can pop
Yeah,
up?
yeah.
And I'm not saying that because I
You're
want
owl.
to.
Little owl, yeah.
Just we are inherently conservative. We are inherently risk averse, and changing that will take a lot of time. So, I'm doing my best. I know you guys are doing your best. Everybody's doing their best to try to nudge towards more risk taking and innovation because we desperately need it. But I think for the most part, we still will be. But we can't sit on the sidelines forever. We can't. We just cannot. There's too much gold in them there hills.
So share us your takeaways of your talk, and I'm curious to know.
Just takeaways of his own talk?
Yeah. Summarize your talk, but I'm curious to know people came to you afterwards and what resonated with the audience.
So the response was generally positive, but in my experience, data people are reluctant to give critical feedback. So, I do appreciate positive response. It was great. It was wonderful. But the persona of the typical data and analytics person is not one to say, you know what, hey, that really sucked and here's why. And I think we actually need more of that. We need more contrarian views. We need more people to be willing to stand up and say, hey, Mr. Keynote, fancy pants, your presentation sucked, and here's why.
I don't want anybody coming up to me and telling me I sucked.
Well, okay, maybe it's a little extreme, but it is the,
But I get you.
here's
Or what
here's
about
you-
I disagree with you on this
exactly.
point, right?
So my presentation was largely based on a revelation I had while a Gartner analyst, which was what I hear and what I heard. I spoke to 1,500 different CDOs and CIOs, 1,500 over 3 years. And what I heard day in and day out was a lot of negativity. Was a lot of, we can't do this because we've always done it that way, or the customers just don't get it, or you can lead a horse to water. Nobody cares about data quality. They're not data driven. You're not giving me the buy-in that I need.
Here's all the reasons why it's not going to work.
Exactly right. And what I figured out over a 3-year span was that when I heard a CDO say, my organization is not data driven, which is consistently a top 3 reason why CDOs say they are unable to drive value. CDO survey after CDO survey after CDO survey. What is your biggest barrier, Mrs. CDO or Mr. CDO? It is, my company is not data driven. Consistently. But what I learned is when I heard that was code. It was actually code for my business partners aren't doing what I want them to do. Because I'd ask them, what do you mean? What do you mean not data driven? Well, they're not showing up to governance committee meetings. They're not participating in a data quality. They're not helping us do governance. They're undercutting. They're putting throwing crap data over the wall. They don't care about data, like all of this stuff. And it was, they're not doing what I want them to do for me to succeed. And that is evidence of a lack of a data culture. And I would actually, in the same companies, I would talk to people in procurement. I would talk to people in finance, and they're very data driven. They wanted more data. So they were saying, hey, I actually need more data. I want a supplier 360. I want to understand the risk of taking on this new supplier. So there was this delta between what I was hearing from CDOs, which is they're not data driven. And when I was talking to actually people in the business unit, said, yeah, we are. And we just need this.
I need more data.
And so what is the break? What I concluded is that we're not customer centric. We're just not customer centric. and we are out there putting data first and not customers first. And the best kind of corollary that I could find in the world of kind of like business psychology was this idea of a growth mindset. Carol Dweck, the Stanford PhD, wrote this book in 2006 called Mindset, the Psychology of Success, where she said that there are people who have growth mindsets. They're seekers, they're learners, they're developers, they're growers. They want feedback. They are insanely obsessed with helping customers. And then there's people who are not. And what I've concluded, based on my non-quantitative, non-scientific research, but pretty reasonable sample size, is that far too many of us are not growth mindset driven at all. At all. We're more negative mindset. We are more likely to embrace the status quo. We're more likely to blame external forces. Here's another one. Psychologists have this theory of something called of an external locus of control, which is a hallmark of somebody who embraces more of a fixed or negative mindset, which says that I'm not responsible for my state in life. It's others outside of me that are hindering me. It's others outside of me that are stopping me. It's my business stakeholders who aren't engaging. It is my customers who don't care about data quality. It is my organization that's not data driven. It is is the users who lack skill. It's them. And if you look at the CDO data, the surveys, all of the biggest roadblocks are external to the CDO organization, with one exception: skills, resources, the skills of the people within the CDO team, within the data and analytics team. That's the only exception.
How I've managed my team.
Most of the reasons CDOs give for not driving value are external to their organization. It's being done to me. It's not my failing. It's them. And that was the kind of this aha moment that's like, oh man, we got a lot to fix.
It's a pretty big mind shift, mindset shift, right?
One of the things I really like, the takeaway I have, that I'm thinking about right now from your keynote, was have this mentality of service.
Yeah.
Like, so you talk about there are these consumers of the data, right? There are customers, and we need to service them. And it makes me realize, like, when I have never worked in service industries, right? But this is something that we need to be empathized. Like, how do I service other people? Like, how do I greet people? How to make sure that, what do you want? And I have something that you want. Let me go get that to you. Let me go understand what you're doing. And you gave the example of, like, how about you look over somebody's shoulder when they're filling out a form in Salesforce to go see what they're doing? Like, that's the type of stuff that we need to go look into, because and it's like, understand what they're doing. And then you realize, oh, maybe if could this work so you can be faster? It's like, oh, that makes you faster, and that makes my data better. So the other confused, like, those are the types of things that we need to start doing, and make a lot of these observations in service of those customers that we have. And I think that, for me, is that's a human aspect here that we need to do more.
So my background's in product management.
Yes,
right?
Great
and
start.
I feel like there's a lot of connections between the pain that you said around, like, okay, people having this external feeling that there's an external locus of control. Like, the most challenged product leaders are the ones who also try to put the control outside of their own bucket, right? And they say, oh, well, my product wasn't successful because the sales team wasn't selling it properly, or the marketing team didn't do the right messaging around it, or the finance team didn't let me have enough engineers, or the engineering team didn't understand the requirements, right? But the successful and really prosperous product leaders are the ones that say, hey, I'm going to be accountable for what I can drive. I'm going to have a growth mindset. And I can't control all these things, but that's okay. My job is to navigate that and to build that collaboration and that groundswell. And I feel a lot of connections here because, for example, some of the product leaders that do the best are not the ones who sit in the corner and pontificate about what the future might be and use fancy buzzwords. They're the ones who go and meet with the business and meet with the salesperson and meet with the customer and ask them hard questions and immerse themselves in the pain, in the use cases that people are experiencing. And it seems like that connects really, really closely to the data.
You're going to find the data opportunities.
Entirely.
No matter what, you go into that space, you talk to the business, you talk to people in operations, you talk any department you've got. There's going to have problems that data can help solve. They may not even know it yet. But what we tend to do is go, here's some data stuff, apply it to this versus,
understanding what you're trying to go do.
Even if it's the same thing.
Or
okay? That's
let
just
me
good
tell
stuff.
you about our data lake architecture and why it's so
exactly.
cool,
Yes.
right?
Fabric
Right.
mesh
Yes.
Spanx
Yeah.
architecture.
That's it.
So it's interesting. So knowing the audience here, I tailored my presentation for primarily individual contributors.
Yeah.
But the book that I'm writing that'll be released this summer,
All
Wiley
right.
Publishing,
There we
Nice.
go.
Oh.
Exciting.
the number one recommendation, and it's focused mostly for CDOs, is implement product management as a discipline to data analytics.
Nice.
That is the number one thing, because my background is product as well.
Mhm.
And it's like, make yourself accountable. Take a design-centric view, right? Like do, planning session, user-centric design session, stand over somebody's shoulder, watch what they're clicking and what they're not clicking. Like build great products that people want to use and would be willing to pay for. If we do that, then the training component will be marginal. It'll be minimal. It'll be
Right.
this afterthought as a part of a go-to-market function that's important for products, but it's not the thing.
Yeah, you got to be careful about how much of the burden you place on everyone else to come
Yes.
to you. Oh, they're not data driven enough. It's putting the burden on everybody to come to you, as opposed to figuring out, how do I integrate more into the workflows that exist? How do I find a pain point and remove it?
Yeah, I just saw over and over and over again CDOs saying that stakeholders are not engaging enough, and that is evidence of a lack of being data driven.
Yeah.
To me, that is clear evidence of a lack of customer centricity. So that's where we need to get to. I think that's what I talked about. It seemed to resonate, but I think also to a certain degree that maybe there's a little bit of shock and awe, right? Maybe
Yeah.
there's a digestion period that needs to happen. Maybe some people it won't resonate at all, and that's fine too. I suspect a lot of people in the room were like, this isn't relevant to me. This is more relevant to my boss.
Yeah.
Because my head is down and I'm doing my stewardship or I'm doing my whatever. And that's okay. That may be true. But product management to me is the number one lever here, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Like organizationally.
That table in the corner loved it. Our favorite table.
So the people who
Our
were laughing the
favorite
most
table.
were from Iceland. So
Were they? Is that where they're from?
I don't know. It's like,
Because I got the
wait a
same
minute, is
table.
it
I love
like-
it. It's like a
like-
table over there. Over
I gotta
there
go to
for standing
Iceland.
on stage.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
And they
You're
were
huge in
just-
Nigeria, and maybe I got a place in Iceland.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I could
I'll
do
go
like
to
Hasselhoff
Iceland. I
in
love it.
Iceland.
I love Iceland. Yeah, I was there. I went
All right.
there.
So you brought up the thing I love, the data literacy.
He goes
All right.
after it.
All right.
really.
So I'm curious. Anybody come up and say anything about it? Did
No.
they disagree with you?
No, but
Did people come up and say agree with you?
So I had a really good conversation with Christine Haskell about this, who's a big proponent of data literacy. And there are others who are big proponents of data literacy. And, I'm very critical of data literacy. And it's not because people don't care. People do care. People are trying to make a difference. But I don't want to be called illiterate as a customer. And if we can just agree that the terminology sucks.
Yeah, it's not a great position.
The terminology
when
just
you
kind of
inverse
sucks.
it like that,
Right, exactly.
which I don't think was ever their intent, but it is.
Well, I do think it was.
But the intent was like, oh, the problem is over there, not here.
No, the intent was to sell click. So I would argue, with much deference to my friend Jordan Morrow, who's very,
Yes.
very smart and who
He's a lovely
cares,
guy.
who's
Which,
an
by the way,
amazing
just came
human
out a
being.
book.
Yes,
on
Business 101. Go
Bus-
buy
number
that book.
5.
business
number
literacy
five.
for the data.
Business
book.
literacy,
I know.
yes, which is
And
a
you're
big
trying to
believer
pick a
in.
fight with him. He's
I'm
like, hey,
I'm
you're
not
cool.
trying to pick a
Come
fight
on
with-
in.
By the way,
I'm-
Jordan,
when you first
Jordan will
met,
be
he's
a
like,
guest in.
He's too nice.
I'm not trying to pick a fight with Jordan because he
He
cares.
out-niced
and
you
he's
as a
try-
Canadian.
he's
He's
trying-
not even Canadian.
Well,
He
but
out-niced
you got to break some shit if you want to fix stuff.
Yeah.
If you want to fix stuff, you got.
All right, that's a T-shirt story that we got to break some shit if you want to fix them.
Oh, I
Anyway.
thought we out-niced you. I was going to do that one too.
That
So,
could be
so
a
I
t-shirt
would
too,
argue
yeah.
that and
I know you would argue.
Jordan can hold my feet to the fire on this, and I'm comfortable with that. That's fine. I'm open to being wrong. But when Jordan was at Click, he was the lead evangelist at
Yeah.
Click. They commissioned a survey that was the genesis for a white paper, which became the data literacy movement. I would argue there were some people talking about data literacy before then, but Jordan published a white paper when he was at Click. It took off. It got picked up by Deb Logan at Gartner, got
Right,
put
yeah.
on the hype cycle, and it went like a rocket once it got onto the hype cycle.
Mhm.
And I would argue, and I'm not trying to be mean, and because I work for a vendor, but I know how this stuff works. When vendors commission studies, You're looking for a specific outcome. And at that time, Click was trying to drive the democratization of data. What's the number one roadblocker to the democratization of data and people using dashboards across the entire organization? Every single person having a end user license to Click, what is the number one thing holding us back? It's education. It's education. And how do we get in front of that? Well, we educate. So I go into detail on this in my book, and if I'm wrong, if this is some crazy conspiracy theory, hold my feet to the fire. But Gartner picked it up in a hype cycle. I would say in 2020, I think was the first time they actually put it on a hype cycle, maybe 2021, and it went off like a rocket. And
I thought it was earlier than that.
No. I mean, there were people talking about it.
Pedantic cycle in the book too.
Yes, the semantic.
The pedantic semantic or
the pedantic semantic feedback loop.
Let me get it. The
pedantic semantic feedback loop. Yes,
Yeah,
it's our desire to create new words.
Yeah, I love it.
And it was borrowed.
It's the machine.
It was a conversation just like this with me and Doug Laney.
Okay.
At a conference, and we were talking about why do we create new words all the time? Why do we make new words? And he's like, well, it's just semantic pedanticism.
Semantic.
Yes.
No,
and
it
I was
has
like,
a
Doug,
lovely kind of rhythmic
brilliant.
thing to it.
Can I use that? He's like, yeah, you can use that. It's like, it's a semantic pedantic feedback loop because when we create new words, we hype them. So here's how it works.
I love the irony that this phrase is self-defining.
Yes,
it is. Yeah.
So here's how it works.
Meta.
Well, vendors or analysts or other thought leaders will create new words when other ones are perfectly good.
Yeah.
But we'll create new words because, frankly, what we do is mostly evergreen. Mostly evergreen. Governance is mostly evergreen. The stuff we do doesn't change.
What AI
much.
governance?
But it's mostly evergreen. So if you
need to find something new.
If you're trying to sell a license to your recurring subscription for insights, if you are trying to create some pizzazz, you'll create new words. And you'll say, nah, it's not training. It's something new. Something new. And when you do that, the analysts will start to hype it because they want something new because they're selling. They want their subscriptions to renew. Once they pick it up, then all the vendors are like, "What? Look at what the analysts are saying." Then the vendors pick it up, and the vendors start to pump it, and it starts this.
They have it as a new thing.
Yes,
I know.
Yes, and then data leaders are like, "Well, what are the analysts saying?"
These words are like altcoins,
meme coins,
and meme coins, and you got to pump them up.
Shiba Inu, and
to the moon,
and the Pepe coin, the Doge.
Yeah, it's a cycle.
So I'll stop talking.
So to close the loop on this, right? Close the feedback loop. What word or phrase do you like? Like if somebody, if you're
user
like,
enablement,
don't use data literacy.
I'll put it back to you. You're running a product management function, and you are initiating a go-to-market motion for a new product. What would you call it?
I like the word enablement.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Or training, but I prefer enablement.
Training or enablement, right? Like enablement is less about I have to make you an expert. It's just like I need to arm you with what you need to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
But part of my gripe is that I would talk to these CDOs and I'd ask them, what's the state of the nation like? What's going on? Oh, well, all the things, like all of the no engagement, no buy-in, not data-driven. Oh, okay, well, that sucks. I'm sorry to hear that. What are you going to do? I'm implementing a data literacy program. Like that was the answer to the problem is I'm implementing a data literacy program. And I'm like, oh man, you don't have a product manager. You're not very customer centric. You don't really understand what your customers are or aren't doing. Like, and you're putting the cart way before the horse. Like,
well, maybe they can just treat it like anti-harassment training and make you watch a video.
Then you have to go.
But that's how the customers are responding to it.
Yeah,
they're like, you're forcing me into data training.
Yeah,
and I don't really even like the products that you're giving me, and you're forcing me to get trained in the products that I don't like to use.
Or something I've always heard is that it takes it the other way around. You're training me in something that looks great that I want to go use, but then we don't even have the tool or the data doesn't exist. Like, so then why did I just go through that training if I can't even use that?
But it's coming 3 quarters from now.
Yeah.
We're going to have it.
Here's how to make a dashboard, but you're not allowed to have a license, right?
Yeah. No, this is something that when you're doing the enablement, like this is something you have to consider.
So my thing is that one of them is that we embrace these ideas that reinforce the status quo, and we don't even know that they're having negative impacts.
Yeah.
We don't even know that they're having negative impacts. And we don't even know that there's a potential that implementing a data governance program without a focus on all those other things, user experience, building great products, would the user be willing to pay for this? Like all of that stuff, we don't even know that there's a negative impact there.
No.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to shine a light on. And even if you think I'm wrong, and if you think I'm crazy, like hopefully maybe at least you're thinking, yeah, that's a really horrible term, and I wouldn't want anybody to call me illiterate.
Yeah.
So maybe I need to think again.
You didn't use your Frito line. I was waiting for your Frito line.
Well, dude, I didn't go to the Giggo. I didn't go to Giggo.
No, but your Frito line.
But the Frito line
am I
was
gonna
the
do it, or
Giggo.
are you going to do it?
What's the
what,
Frito
you
line?
do
What
it
are-
at-
I'll do it. You never hear the COO of Frito-Lay complaining that their corn is garbage all the time. Is the COO of Coors going to complain that their water is garbage all the
I
time?
thought it was. You never hear You never hear Frito talk about how their customers are corn illiterate.
I could do that too.
I thought
They just
I
don't
thought that was the
understand.
proof.
Corn.
No. I have a play on both. I can go to.
I
either.
think illiterate play. I think it's better. I think it
Corn
hits on
illiterate,
corn
yeah.
because corn illiterate is those two words have never appeared next to each other,
But
other
yeah.
than when you
Google,
said
here I
that.
come.
So
I'm
there's
going
like
to own that
luckily,
search
a
term.
comedic opportunity there versus
Luckily, Frito is working on a corn literacy
yeah,
program.
corn literacy
It'll be
program.
fine.
Yeah.
It'll all work out.
Or I love
Yeah.
what you were saying is like, wait, every company is a data company, every company is a software company, now every company is an AI company, but what? It's like every company is
Every company's a paperclip
Look,
company. Yeah, same thing, same logic. I think a lot of people want to be data driven. They just can't find a place to park.
Yeah, that's fair.
all right.
All right,
I'm trying to contribute.
Hold on.
So here, I'm thinking about a way to cap this off, right?
Oh,
right.
okay.
So, what if each of us here, coming out of this conference, right? Greatest excitement, greatest fear. Malcolm, you want to kick this off?
Greatest fear is inertia and the status quo, which are closely tied to each other. Greatest excitement is finding a way to apply more traditional data management and data governance processes to unstructured data.
So I think greatest fear always is same old, same old. Next year we come back, we're talking about the same old, which my fear is that that's going to happen, and I really hope that it isn't. And my excitement is that I think hope that we'll just keep it simple. We'll like go. I mean, do less. More is less, and I think people are hopefully seeing there's so much stuff, and they're like, but I can just start with this basic stuff.
All right, for me, greatest excitement is the people. I think we've got some damn smart people here in data leadership, analytic leadership, and governance leadership positions, and we're gonna make some change, and we're gonna make some progress. So it's the people. That's what I'm excited about. The thing I'm fearful of is that governance people will be too slow to embrace what's happening in AI, and it will happen to us instead of happening with us.
It's already happening.
That's my fear, and it's already happening.
That's why keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Start making progress. Junaid from First Bank Capital, right? He said, "Are you AI ready?" Yes, you are already AI ready. Like, don't wait to become AI ready. Like, you got to move forward. So, I agree. What about you?
Greatest excitement is that everything that happens in technology and the latest with AI still requires the work that these folks in this community do. Non-negotiable.
Yep.
And the fear part is consistent for me is that they're not in the room. They don't get in the conversations. They don't realize, or the people who need to
gonna happen without
don't
us.
realize the the role that they
Jump
play.
in, get involved,
And so
talk to people.
Those opportunities are there.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Yep.
This was a fantastic. What's going on? Something's happening.
Oh, there's a
Here
thing
comes
happening.
Santa Claus.
Here
comes Santa Claus.
We just want to thank you too. We had a couple of
Oh, thank you.
don't open them on the air, but we.
Oh, man.
I hope that fits.
This present is
And,
huge.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
Malcolm has the gift receipt here, but we really want to
Yes,
thank you for
yeah,
the
exactly.
opportunity.
Hopefully it's not full of hot air.
Christmas. No,
It probably is full
Yeah,
of hot
yeah.
air.
Let me put it this way: you're never going to get that through security. It's in this.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right.
goodness.
We-
Happy
I-
holidays,
as always,
everyone.
You guys are awesome.
Hey,
We're
cheers,
super lucky to be
guys.
part of this community.
Juan,
Cheers.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank
Cheers to
you.
all our
everybody.
listeners. Appreciate
All right,
it.
next week is our season finale. Tim and I are going to do the takeaways of the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, and we promise that GPT will only be minorly involved. We use AI to help us now, but we don't when we're doing live notes. We promise.
All right. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.